I'll call the May 13th of 2014 meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. This time, if you'd stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Just a reminder, if you have cell phones on, if you would please put them on the silent mode, please. Could we have a roll call, Kelly?
Kimball?
Yes.
Latham?
Here.
Carey?
Here.
Ostermeyer?
Here.
Hampy?
Here.
Porter?
Here.
Let the record show that all commissioners are present with the exception of Ryan Davis, who is excused.
Okay, thank you. Any amendments to the agenda tonight?
No, sir, we do not.
Okay. Any appointments, announcements, presentations? Conflicts? Any of the council members have conflicts on the agenda tonight?
No.
No.
All right, we'll move to the consent calendar. Need a motion to approve.
Can't do it.
Need a motion from the council?
Even though I was 6 minutes late, I will go ahead at the last meeting. I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the minutes as presented for the last month's April 8th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
I second.
Roll call, Kelly?
Kimball?
Abstain?
Ostermeyer?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Hampy?
Yes.
Latham?
Aye.
Porter?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay, we're at a point in our meeting for citizens' comments. If anyone is in the audience that would like to address the commission this evening that is addressing an issue not on the agenda, you're welcome to take the podium and do that at this time. Seeing none, we'll move on. No unfinished or old business. Okay, we're at the point in our meeting for public hearings. To begin with, if anyone wants to speak at any of those hearings this evening, and you haven't already filled out a form to speak, they're on the podium in the back. Please do that and get that up to Kelly in the front on the front table up here, please. Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing for Expo at Post Falls Zone Change, ZC 1401. John.
Good evening, Commissioners. John Manley, Associate Planner here at the City of Post Falls, introducing Expo, the Post Falls Zone Amendment, case file ZC 14-02. The applicant is Watson and Associates. The applicant requests a zone change of approximately 117 acres from industrial to the following: 68 acres of community commercial services, 47 acres medium density multifamily residential, R2 zoned, and 2 acres of high density multifamily residential, R3 zoned. The Planning and Zoning Commission is being asked to hear the proposal, determine if the proposed amendments meet the requirements of the ordinance, and to recommend approval or denial of the request to City Council. The general location is where you see here on the asterisk, south of Celtice Way, north of I-90, east of what is to be completed Beck Road, and west of Pleasant View Road. The existing zoning currently, you have the Woodbridge subdivision with surrounding by industrial zone properties. Beck Road has commercial predominantly along its north-south alignment, with west of Beck Road being mostly zoned industrial. The proposed zoning is for the parcel is just south of Celtice Way, east of Beck Road right here is to go from industrial to CCS at this location. Jacqueline Road, once completed, south of Woodbridge, you have a parcel of the R2 zone with CCS, Community Commercial Services, running parallel to I-90, abutting both community commercial services to the east and west, with along the east side of Woodbridge, R3 zone being proposed instead of the industrial. As stated, the project size is approximately 117 acres, with the comprehensive plan designation being commercial industrial. The current land use is vacant, with the water provided by from north to Jacqueline Road, East Green Acres, south of Jacqueline Road would be City of Post Falls. Once again, Jacqueline Road, so the CCS and the R3 lots, all north of that road would be East Green Acres. Sewer being provided by the City of Post Falls. So at this time, this would conclude staff's introduction.
Okay. Thank you, John. We'd have the applicant come forward, please, and you'll have 15 minutes to present to the commission.
Are you going to run the mouse or am I? Okay. Thank you, Chairman Borders, members of the commission. I'm Gary Burton. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for Watson & Associates. I'm accompanied here by Drew Dittman of Lake City Engineering, and Jim Watson is in the audience here, and he's the founder and president of Watson & Associates. I want to get right into the property we've been developing in Post Falls. Let me get you to describe this here. First off, we got Pleasant View Road, and then on the other side, all the way down to the border. Yeah, over there. You see Cabela's is over there. Now, going back up to Woodbridge, let me break this our development down. This is the current Woodbridge development. It's 270 homes. We did that some time ago. And then all the rest of the property around it there, Andrew can use the little marker to show it, is all what we call Expo. And right now that is zoned industrial. Now, we do have a little piece of it that is a commercial zoning too. But down by the border, we have 14 acres, 8 of them which are in the City of Post Falls, and they're adjacent to Cabela's. So that's the what we've been working on for a number of years now. And on the next slide, I'll show you, Jim has owned this property, Jim Watson, since 1992. Now, he got nearly all of it back there in 1992, but he's put a few little pieces together to put the 313 acres that are a part of our development out there. Now, we've 69 acres were taken up by the Woodbridge development, and 32 acres have been sold. And of that 32, it was 35 parcels that have been sold. We still have industrial and commercial property out there of 212 acres. Now, that is a very poor absorption rate. We're not doing well on the industrial piece of this thing. We've sold 32% of the total acres, but 69 acres were with the Woodbridge project, and only 32 in that 22 years are associated with the commercial and industrial. Quite frankly, we think there's a need for a change out there. When I went to business school, I was told that if something isn't work, try something new. And we're here to talk to you about that. So we've been marketing the property since 1992, and currently we're working with the company of Goodale and Barbary. And we just started that relationship with them. They're a full-service real estate company, and they do have a specialty in commercial, and we're really excited now about getting them on board and seeing what they can do for us, on our, especially in our commercial property. We're committed to the development in Post Falls. A while back, we sold 16 acres to Fred Meyer. Fred Meyer studied the property and decided they couldn't build because they did not have the rooftops to support their store out there. And we bought those 16 acres back from Fred Meyer. Also, there was a Burger King out there. Burger King went bankrupt, and we bought that back also. Now, for a long time, the Burger King has not been occupied, and it became somewhat of an eyesore. However, we sold it last month to a company called Truck Insurance Office, Inc., and I walked through that yesterday, and it is real nice. They've gutted it, and they've started over again, and it looks great on the exterior and the interior. What used to be an eyesore is now becoming a gem right at the entrance of Expo, and so we're pretty excited about that. I just had to share that with you. When we look for the need for housing out there in West Post Falls, we have Pleasant View on the right there, and then you have Beck over there, and then you have the border going out this way. And you can see the only housing in West Post Falls is our project, Woodbridge. And there's 270 homes in that project. Now, when you look at the area outside the city limits, that theme continues. There's an excessive amount of commercial and industrial out there. And nothing's going to happen unless we start getting some rooftops out there. Now, the current plan we're looking at is to do some single-family residence out there right south of the current Woodbridge development. And also, we're looking to rezone some property for commercial and for multifamily. We're going to still retain a vast majority of Expo for our commercial and industrial efforts out there. I'm going to show that to you here on this map. This is the map that you were just looking at that John presented. And the R3 zoning out there is what we're looking for, that little small area there for multifamily. The CCS in the upper left there is something that's a pretty valuable piece of property to us. Once Beck Road is done, that's right at the corner of Saltese and Beck Road. So we're examining that very carefully, trying to figure out the exact usage of that. So we think the CCS zoning is something that's appropriate. Now, the R2 zoning down below there is going to be, and you'll see this in your next item that comes up in the subdivision, we're planning 186 single-family residents there. And now you might ask, why not R1? Well, the main reason is that we know that the property next to us there, which is part of the point, is now going to be a multifamily. And we're going to start our development going east to west. And we're going to be coming toward that project. And we don't know if there's going to be required to put some kind of a buffer between us and that particular project. Now, what would a buffer be? Maybe it might be some condos or something, but something that might buffer that. So we think the R2 is appropriate for that piece of land. Also, we're changing from industrial down 55 acres down along the freeway there. Now, that will allow us to use, to go with light industrial, commercial, or with a special use permit with R3 zoning. We didn't feel that the zoning for industrial was appropriate next to the housing project up there. So we're trying to mitigate that and make it something that is a livable community there. Now, we've gotten a lot of support for the project. We got letters from Wadsworth, the development company at the point, and we've had some conversations with them, and we're really pleased to be able to talk to them and work out something that strikes a balance for West Post Falls. So they were excited to to support us on this. Cabela's also provided a letter. Walmart signed a petition. CLC Restaurants, Taco Bell. Now, we, a number of years ago, sold a parcel to Taco Bell. Taco Bell's been sitting on that parcel out there waiting for the rooftops. We talked to them, about a month ago and told them about this plan. And they did write a letter in support of the plan. And they said that they may build their restaurant next year now. So we were excited about that too. Love's Travel Center is supporting us. Ground Force Worldwide is supporting us. And Woodbridge homeowners, we got a number of them to sign a petition. I'm still waiting for their letter yet of support, but the people I've talked to, and I've talked to their manager, is pretty much supportive of this project. There was a little confusion over the R2 versus the R1. Expo commercial and industrial tenants, I believe every one of them signed a petition, and a number of them have sent in letters. So we've got support of all the tenants out there. A number of the people that are around us, too, have sent in letters. Toro Vio, the Mexican restaurant out there, they've been there 17 years and struggling at that location. And now, when we informed them of this, they were excited about it, and they sent in a letter. So we're pleased with the community support we've seen for this project. Now, what does the project do? Well, you know, it's going to create jobs. It's going to be good for business. It's going to not only be for the benefit of Expo, but it's going to assist all the other developers in the area. Additionally, it makes our property more marketable. We'll be able to complete some of the roads that will give access to our property, and we think our commercial and industrial property we have left to sell will become more valuable, and we hope that our new brokers will be able to sell it. In regards to the infrastructure, Drew's going to present that when he presents the subdivision regarding water, sewer, and electrical. But I want to take just a moment on the roads. Let me point out Jacqueline Road there. Jacqueline Road is going to be constructed as part of this, and it's going to connect our property all the way through now, and that will connect it up with the point out there. Not only is it good going west, it's good going east too, because it's connecting us with our industrial property up there and our commercial property up there. So it's going to be a nice road it's also going to be used for the housing tract there, the subdivision. But we're pretty excited about getting that road done, and we think it's going to open up the property. Eventually, Expo Parkway will be completed all the way through, and that has to go through Wadsworth, the Points property also. And then Creative Way up there is going to drop down and connect into Expo Parkway. So that is going to probably be done at the same time as Jacqueline Road. The requested changes, all of them are from industrial to a number. I won't go through all the parcels. They're in the staff report, but these are a listing of the parcels that will be changed, that the zoning will be impacted. Now, I want to also include as part of my comments, and before I forget, I also want to compliment the staff, John and Hillary and Kelly and Bill Melvin is in the audience someplace. They've been very helpful, and they've been available when we've come down and met with them. So a big thank you to them. I liked their staff report, so I went through and I abstracted some of the statements in the staff report. The zone change is consistent with the text of the comprehensive plan, including goals and policies. Commercial development does depend on nearby rooftops. Zone change will provide a more compatible environment than industrial in the context of prior approved special use permit and the adjacency to residential, and that's the 55 acres down along the freeway I think we're talking about there. Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization looked at Expo as an area to provide for the demand created by population growth. And then the last statement. I couldn't write a better conclusion. So, the proposed subdivision, and in conjunction with the proposals that have been approved as part of the Point at Post Falls project, complement each other with the intent to create a desirable, stable, and sustainable community. We believe that the proposed zoning change will result in economic benefits to the city of Post Falls. Mr. Chairman, that concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move then into testimony. So I would like Kelly,
Staff,
any...
Commissioner, staff report first, and then it'll be the public.
sorry.
Thank you.
John will give you time for the staff report.
Right, thank you. So the Planning Division looked at the proposed zone change and did find that it was consistent with the goals and policies within the comprehensive plan. But it was not completely consistent with the future land use map. As you'd seen, that one item that is consistent is that commercial core that runs parallel to I-90. That theme is still currently being proposed, as you see here, with commercial going from west to east parallel. Also, it was important for staff to look at what they're proposing. Not only, you could look at the zoning ordinance, but it kind of blinds you in the fact that when you, sorry, trying to locate exactly where that map was at. Here. Now, on the west of Beck Road, other than Cisco, it's pretty much slated for commercial development of sorts. So when you're looking at how does it fit with the underlying zoning, it kind of brings some inconsistencies versus what is being proposed for development and how are they compatible. So,
John,
now,
is that on the west side there, is that by a special use permit commercial, or is it, so this
no, it's zoned commercial right here, outright. What you see, what I have outlined here, is the multifamily that's permitted within that commercial zone through the special use permit.
Okay,
And
and
that's
is
all.
the Cabela's property, it's basically, is the commercial use there an allowed use under the industrial zoning, or is it there through some sort of a?
It was approved through a master site plan for the whole area, so that got approved through a master site plan.
Like a PUD of sorts?
Yes.
Okay.
And so within that master site plan, they got approved for it. So it's more of a commercial development area. And
Okay.
a lot of it is in industrial. A lot of the commercial is permitted in industrial. So from that aspects, there's not a lot of difference. But when you think industrial, when you see industrial, you perceive something different. So that's why I have this map to look at the red as being, that's commercially oriented. You know, Cisco's industrial oriented, up Beck Road, commercial, and what they're proposing being CCS. How does that fit from the east into the west? So we saw this as being consistent with the comp plan and compatible with each adjoining proposed uses. You look at the approved special use permit being at this location, and with the intersecting of the collector of Southeast Way and Beck, that CCS was a viable zone for that location. Also, with being commercial and industrial, at this intersection, that R3 seemed compatible at that location. And the R2 zone, with its ability to flex going from the east to the west, merging up to a potential future multifamily, seemed like an acceptable proposed zone at that location. So the whole concept of additional rooftops, as the applicant mentioned, KMPO and staff worked together to look at future population. How is that going to affect Post Falls, and where is that population going to go, and how does it overlay with the transportation corridors long term? So we looked at 2020 and 2035, as well as 2014, but for this evening, I just put the 2020 and 2035, that we went up, we allocated for all the approved subdivisions, Crown Point, Montrose, Tullamore, Foxtel, we put all those down there, and it left some remaining portion of units. Where are they going to go? Well, assuming that the market would push growth, and if that's a reality, they're probably going to, the market's going to push them in some area. That pushed us into, even though it was zoned industrial, and the comprehensive plan showed it as being a mix between commercial and industrial, to go ahead and throw those units there that you see there, a total of 200 by 2020 and potentially up to 700 by 2035. Also, there were supporting comp plan policies of encouraging a balance of land uses. Also, ordinary activities should be within walking distance of most residences, which you'd create that with a mix of commercial and residential. Throughout the community, a range of housing types and price levels should be provided. And that Post Falls should ensure adequate land is available for future housing needs. Engineering Division commented and that the requested zoning was run in the regional transportation model maintained by KMPO, and found the results in that model indicated that if the zone changes are approved, the roadway widths and right-of-ways could be reduced for those indicated in the city standards section. For water, is that with the close proximity of the West Post Falls standpipe, that there is adequate capacities to meet fire flow requirements. And as far as the water reclamation, that the City of Post Falls has the capacity to serve the subject lands. Both the Kootenai County Fire and Rescue and the Post Falls Police Department have both commented and have no issues with the proposed zone change amendment. At this point, I'd stand for any questions you have for staff at this point in time.
Questions for staff?
I just had a question on the road, on Jacqueline finishing it. I know that they said they were going to put that in or finish it up. Would that also be a requirement of staff or the city for them to put Jacqueline Road in either prior to or during construction in any of this R2 zone changed property?
Yeah, they'd be required to put in Jacqueline Road with the subdivision approval.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for John? Okay, John.
All right, thank you.
You bet. All right, now we'll move into public testimony. And first, Kelly, could I have those that are in favor of? All in favor. Okay. First one on the top of the list is Mr. Templin.
I don't have a long written message here. I'll put that down so it won't be long. Okay. Bob Templin, 998 East Templin Court, Post Falls. I briefly want to say a few words about Jim Watson. The years that were up there, 92, that's about the time we became acquainted. And we also became acquainted through many of the proposed projects that he has tried to establish on the property, the Expo property. And we were fortunate enough to have many of those meetings down at the hotel. At one time there was a proposal that Jim spent a lot of money on for a big car plaza for automobiles and so on. And that was about the time Fred Meyer, I personally hauled the Fred Meyer people around in our van for one day looking at his projects and many more. And but I want you to know that through these years, Jim Watson has become very close to many people in Post Falls. He's been a supporter of many projects. His name doesn't always pop up because he hasn't wanted to. But occasionally I know of some secret things that he's done that's just wonderful. Next to our home on the river, Jim Watson took about 4 acres and developed it into, carved out the rocks and so on, and he was going to build a home there. And so the project finally ended up that he couldn't move up in this area at that time, so he sold the lots. The home next to ours is at $2.9 million. The next home, the Guthrie home, is $1.2 million. The home of the Jewels is $1.2 million. And our home, we hope, is worth $1.2 million. But just think of the taxes that's created for the city in just one little development. And we can all be very proud of it. Every time I stop at Love's, just think of the tax dollars that are rolling into the state and the federal government through that installation. And in the beginning, I was sort of scratching my head and mentioned to Jim, gee, do you really want that kind of a business there? But it's turned out to be great, and it was needed, and it's being supported. And so, Commission, I would urge you to give this a lot of consideration tonight, and I hope that we can find some favoritism for Watson Associates, and I certainly support both of his projects that he has on here. And I thank you for the time.
Thank you. Okay, the next one that I have to speak is Jay Enos. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, I'm Jay Enos, 4897 Mill River Court in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. I just wanted to speak to the history of Expo and specifically Woodbridge. Back in 2002, I was the manager of Crescent Homes. Tom Johnson was mentoring me, and my job responsibility was marketing and build out of Woodbridge. And when we first got started, it was a little bit difficult because we're just kind of out there. I made the joke, when you smile, your teeth got covered with dirt. But as we moved forward and we got specific on the marketing, we stumbled on, through a lot of hard work, on a demographic that became very productive to that area. And it was spouses working in Idaho and specifically the Spokane Valley. And at that time, we were very competitive in price point. When you looked at square footage, Jim was gracious enough to develop lots that were wide enough that we could do some good streetscape and have freedom of architecture, 3-car garages. And once we got dialed into that, we started picking up speed. And right now, if you go in there, there's a lot of those families that are working in the valley, working over here in Coeur d'Alene, Post Falls, but living here and spending that income here. I'm excited. I've been working with Jim and hope to be the builder in there again. I eventually bought out Crescent Homes, and we're now Victory Homes, but it's all the same team, all the same floor plans, and obviously we're in favor of the approval of what we're calling Woodbridge South. I think it has a different name right now. But I also think it's important to mention that through these times, we have to be sensitive to the market and be more market-driven than product-driven. For anybody still standing right now in our industry, you've done a couple things right. And so I think it's been a positive impact. Even through the negative market, Woodbridge recovered very quickly. It was very favored in the resale market. It stayed very clean, and I think that's a testament to the quality of that neighborhood and specifically the location. Obviously, we build in all areas in multiple states, but I'm very excited. I hope that you will approve this project. It's needed. It brings revenue here, not just tax dollars, but the income that comes in, the discretionary income that is spent here. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, next to speak is John Hillier.
My name is John Hillier. I'm with Goodale Barbieri Company in Spokane, and we've been retained by Jim as his broker. Pretty excited about that. We're in support of this rezone due to the fact that there will not be any commercial development for a long, long time without rooftops. We've done some preliminary contacts with a lot of national, regional, and local retailers and commercial folks, and the first thing out of their mouths is, how many rooftops out there? Give us some demographic information and numbers. And we just don't have numbers that would support that type of development or those folks to come into this community at this point in time without the rooftops. So it's pretty straightforward, but if this takes off, I think over the next few years and looking at the numbers that they've put together are really attainable, and it would be great for the community. That's about all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Next, I have Rick Matern. Sir, could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Rick Matern, and my company address is 991 Innovation Way at Expo Park. We have been in that location for 5+ years and have been participating in the growth in that area with the local businesses in there. And we strongly support this application for the rezoning. More residential in that area will help improve all over the overall commercial and create significant jobs and income for everybody. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And the next one I have is David Schindler.
Hi, I'm David Schindler with Hard Rock Concrete, and I'm in favor of this project. It's going to create 50 to 60 temporary jobs. Each resident will create that, and then 2 permanent jobs after the development would be done. And I think it'd be good because we need to have little mix. Too much commercial isn't you know, you need resident rooftops, as we know, to occupy and, you know, go to the commercial. But I'm in favor of this project, and, you know, like to see it go on.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Kelly, could I have those in the neutral, please?
There is no neutral.
Okay, any opposed?
None opposed?
None opposed, okay. At this time then, we'll have a rebuttal from the applicant. Anything that you'd like to pass on that hasn't been discussed?
No, I don't believe we have anything to rebut. I'm pleased with the speakers that came up here, and I encourage you to approve this item.
Okay, thank you very much. With that, we'll close the public hearing then for the zone change, and we'll open it up to this commission.
Which end do we start with?
Okay, let's start with Nancy.
With zone change, I don't have any issues.
Okay.
Yeah, my only reservation was just a slight one, and that was, you know, you take away a big amount of one type of of zoning, and in this case it's industrial, and you just want to do a quick check to make sure that there is enough other industrial zones around the town. And like one of the gentlemen said, there's even some outside the area, inside the area, and you look outside the area, and that's future annexation potential too. So there's a lot of opportunity. If an individual were to come in and say, hey, I'm looking for an industrial piece, there's still plenty to choose from, so I have no problem with that. I think it's good.
Okay. Fred?
I support it.
Okay. Vote this in.
I support it. Fine with it.
Ray?
Yeah, I share Mark's opinion with regards to there's all kinds of industrial in the area, but I think probably the most telling thing is that the industrial within the city of Post Falls, the majority of it there isn't really being used as industrial. It's being used as commercial, and that really shows what the market is, where the market is, and where it has been. And so if that's the trend, then putting the rooftops in with this, you know, mixed development makes sense. So I'm in favor.
Well, I certainly appreciate the developers working with staff to take a look at the overall project and pull this all together in the best interest of the city. I think they've done an excellent job in doing that, and I certainly can support the zone change at this point. I'd like to have a motion.
Vicki, did you have any comments? Or?
No, I'm okay.
You're
The
okay.
answer to anything I had was with the road there.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I would make a motion to recommend approval for ZC 14-02, adopting the findings and facts and conclusions as presented in the staff report. And let's see, I don't think there are any, conditions, recommended conditions of approval, so I'll let it stand at that.
Can you clarify, is it ZC 1401?
02. 01 was
02.
last week.
John
or last month.
presented.
Oh, you're
it
right,
as
so
a-
we have it, okay, sorry, we have our agendas incorrect then, thank you.
Okay. Can you get a second?
I second the motion.
Okay. We have a roll call, Kelly.
Kimball?
Yes.
Ostomeyer?
Yes.
Lathan?
Aye.
Hampi?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Porter?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. We will move on then to the next. I'll open the public hearing now for the Expo 8th Edition Woodbridge Subdivision. John.
So yes, the Expo 8th and Woodbridge South, case file S-14-02, the applicant, Watson and Associates. The request, the action is for subdivision approval of approximately 92 acres into 47 acres of R2 zone lots and 45 acre CCS zone lot. Requested action, review and recommend approval to City Council, the proposed subdivision, determine that it meets the requirements of the ordinance and recommend to City Council approval along with appropriate conditions. Project location, north of I-90, south of Celtice Way, east of the to-be-constructed Beck Road, and west of Pleasant View. Project size approximately 92 acres. Comprehensive plan designation, commercial industrial. Current land use vacant. Water provided. North of Jacqueline Road, East Green Acres, and south of Jacqueline Road, City of Post Falls. Sewer being provided by City of Post Falls. That concludes the staff's introduction.
Okay. The applicant could come forward, please. Just state your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Drew Dittman, Lake City Engineering, 3909 North Schreiber Way, City of Coeur d'Alene. Some of the slides, you'll have to bear with me, we've talked about either in John's presentations or in Gary's presentations earlier, but I still think it's important to cover some of it again. Again, just a quick overview of where the project's at. The proposed subdivision is located directly south of Woodbridge in this area here, Beck Road being right here, and I've highlighted some of the key commercial components in the area just for location purposes. And this one's a little difficult to see, but I've overlaid the subdivision right here on the Google aerial so we can see what's going on. And the purpose of this slide was to show more or less what we're trying to do is just recreate Woodbridge. Very similar street configuration, very similar lot sizes, pedestrian trails, et cetera, very similar to what was done before. It worked for us before, let's do it again. And so that was the purpose of showing this slide. As John had said, the subdivision is a total of 92 acres. It's really two components. The first component highlighted in red there is the residential component, 186 lots as we talked about, 47 acres. The second component is the large commercial remainder area, basically everything south of Expo Parkway, is going to be one large commercial remainder lot at this point. There's no plans for development of it yet. That's why we're leaving it as a remainder lot. But you can see it's a total of 92 acres for the entire subdivision. Here's focusing in on the residential subdivision. Again, you can see it's very similar lot sizes and configuration to Woodbridge. It's important to point out, and I think John will touch on some of this because it was in the staff report, we've got a centrally located park here. We've got a common open space park located here at the entrance. We've decided to do that at the entrance for several reasons. And I know John did talk about some of that in the staff report, but there's going to be some multi-use paths on Expo Parkway and on Jacqueline Road and on the existing Expo Parkway that all kind of converge right there at that intersection. It's going to be a great opportunity to provide some open space, some park benches, some usable civic features like that. This map shows pedestrian trails. Like I said, there's an existing pedestrian facilities, multi-use path along the north side of Jacqueline Road currently. We're proposing multi-use path along the north side of Expo Parkway as well, with interconnected sidewalks to join the two subdivisions together. From an infrastructure standpoint, sewer and water utilities are already currently stubbed to the property. They're there to serve it. They're adequately sized. This is a blow-up of the intersection of Expo Parkway and Jacqueline. There's currently a 15-inch sewer main that runs in Expo Parkway. That runs in Expo Parkway right here, and then there's a 10-inch sewer that runs down Jacqueline. We'll be utilizing those facilities for wastewater. As far as water goes, there's a 12-inch water line stubbed out in Jacqueline Road as well that will serve the project. Both of those, as Bill had attested to, have adequate capacity to handle the infrastructure. And this is a recap of the slide I think that Gary had up there. I just wanted to show the overwhelming community support that we've had, which in our opinion obviously demonstrates the need for more rooftops out there. It's just a list of people who have pledged their support to the project. I really don't have much more to add unless you guys have some questions for me.
Does Commission have any questions for the applicant?
No?
Drew, I had one question. Although not really required by the subdivision ordinance to have parks and civic spaces, I was curious about the configuration of the park and that it really only fronts one street instead of kind of cutting across and fronting two.
You're referring to this
The
one?
centrally located park?
Oh, this one here?
Yeah.
We had bounced that back, and originally we had some of the layouts. We'd actually had the park ray up off of Jacqueline Road, and we had worked with staff and had come to the conclusion, I think, working together, that it was best to have that park centrally located. Obviously, when you have lots back up to the park, they're obviously a little more valuable lots, provides a little better sense of community there. I believe that park is roughly over a half acre in size, so it's a pretty decent sized park. It's comparable to the other parks that are in the existing Woodbridge subdivision, the pocket neighborhood parks that are there.
Will it have play structure or that kind of thing, or just be open green space?
No, I think we've planned it for some type of play structures and whatnot.
I did have a question.
Yes.
What's your average lot size? I see some of them are bigger, so.
They are, and I apologize, I forgot to talk about it. The matrix is shown right there in the lower left-hand corner. 186 lots, average density is about 4 units to the acre, which again is the same size as Woodbridge. The average lot size is just over 10,000 square feet. So they're fairly healthy sized lots.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
John, staff report.
So once again, yeah, due to the zone change and subdivision being heard on the same evening, we do have a lot of repetitious slides. But the main point of this slide is just to show where the subdivision is in proximity to the commercial and residential subdivision that's pre-existing. We looked at the park location. There was 2 neighborhood parks. I looked and I found the average lot size at 7,370, so I don't know where the discrepancy is there or how much that matters. 100% for you, but I did acknowledge that since Drew just answered that there was maybe a discrepancy there with what I found in one of the reports. The Jacqueline Road there in red would be completed with the first phase. The green line, Expo Parkway, which shows their responsible portion, but that would be improved contingent upon each appropriate phase. The Engineering Division commented that the proposed right-of-way widths and roadway configurations would be acceptable, and that the proposed water extensions in Expo Parkway are acceptable. For the water reclamation, that the sanitary sewer alignment is acceptable, and that the City of Post Falls has the current capacity to serve the project, and that a dual 6-inch force main shall be installed along the Jacqueline Road alignment. Both the Post Falls Police Department and Kootenai County Fire have both commented and have no issues with the proposed subdivision. So do you have any further questions?
Any questions for John?
No.
John, real quick, with regards to the potential conditions, shouldn't there be one that a condition of that the zone change be actually approved?
As part of
the subdivision, as in we can't approve a subdivision if the zone change doesn't get approved by city council?
I can I don't know if Will or
Yeah,
Hillary
we
wants to
could.
comment on that.
We'll still have to go back to the city council for both of them, but there won't be, subdivision won't have the second public hearing. We were going to wait, if this did move forward, to have them on the same night so that it wouldn't go to city council prior to the zone
Okay.
change public hearing. So we didn't know that a condition was necessary. We did discuss that. I don't know if Will has a concern with it being added or not.
Probably a better question for Will, I guess. So it's not required? Okay.
Any other questions for John at this point? Guess not. Thank you, John.
Thanks.
All right, Kelly, could I have those petitions for those that are in favor that wish to speak, please?
We have none.
We have none, okay. Any neutral?
We have none.
Any opposed?
We have none.
Okay, we have none. So at this point, again, from the applicant, any rebuttal?
No rebuttal, John was correct, 8,000 square feet was roughly the average. I do apologize for that, I had an error in my slide there. I just double-checked my figures, so.
Thank you.
And Drew, just for the record, what's the minimum size you can have for an R1 and an R2, just for kicks to throw out
I
there?
don't know off the top of my head, John.
It's 6,500 square feet.
6,500?
For both,
Okay.
R1
Well,
and
it
R2.
depends on the use.
Okay.
For the R1, it's 6,500. For a duplex, it's 3,000 square feet per
Got it.
unit. Yeah, 3,600 actually, sorry.
So these
for
are a little
duplex.
larger than minimum? Yeah, 5 hits. Good.
Any other questions for me? Thank you.
Okay, at this point, we're going to close the public hearing for the Expo 8th Edition Woodbridge Subdivision, and I'll open it up for discussion of the commission. Let's start down on this end.
I have no concerns.
Okay. Ray?
I think it makes sense. It's a good layout. It's nice that they're putting in some open space and some park space in there, even though they're not required to.
Okay. Nancy?
I'm in favor.
Okay.
Yep, no comments. Support.
Okay. Looks like everyone supports it. Okay, so we need a motion.
I will move to approve or recommend approval for subdivision S 14-02, adopting the findings of fact and conclusions as presented in the staff report and adopting the conditions of approval in the staff report.
Second?
A second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Kelly, could we have a roll call, please?
Kimball?
Yes.
Latham?
Aye.
Ostermeyer?
Yes.
Campy?
Yes.
Terry?
Yes.
Borders?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Okay. We'll move on then to the Post Falls Landing Infill Neighborhood Plan SmartCode Amendment.
Could we request that you speak into your speakers there? We're having a hard time hearing you. Yes.
Is this better?
Let me open the public hearing first, and we'll hear from Hillary on the introduction of the project.
Okay, great. Good evening, Commissioners. Presenting the Post Falls Landing SmartCode Infill Neighborhood Plan Amendment, case file SCA 13-01. The applicant is Liberty Bankers Life Insurance Company, and the representative is Gary Young with Verdis. Requested action is to review the proposed amendment to the Post Falls Landing SmartCode Infill Neighborhood Plan and recommend approval to the City Council. So the project location is shown here on the screen. It's located west of Spokane Street, generally between 4th Avenue, so south of 4th Avenue, and northeast of the river. So it's southwest of City Hall. The project size is approximately 34 acres. Current land use is vacant with some public improvements along portions of 3rd Avenue, McReynolds Drive, Nonini Drive, and Waterside Drive, and those include the water and sewer infrastructure, the pavement, the sidewalks, curb gutter, and some streetlights. Again, on just some of the portions of the roadways. Current zoning is the SC5, which is Smart Code 5, the urban center. And surrounding uses and zoning, it's the CCS, so the commercial to the northeast and northwest, R3 to the north, Smart Code 5 to the east and southwest, Smart Code 3 to the northwest, and R3 and CCS to the east. I'll show you on the slide here, so it's a little easier to see. And just to point out as well, so the project is here in the hatch lines. This part is not part of the project. That's where the condominiums are and some of the roadways, waterside into the project. Water provider and sewer provider are both City of Post Falls. So I want to go into a little bit of the project history, just so you kind of know where we came from and where we are today. The project was initially approved as a planned unit development, and subdivision was also approved at that time in 2003. The project included, it was a phased mixed-use development, and there was going to be major investments in public facilities, including the on- and off-site improvements. It would have had up to 450 residential units on 30 lots. The density would have been approximately 13 units per acre. 540,000 square feet of commercial and office, some lodging, and civic space, including the 24-foot wide boardwalk and a town square. And the zoning was the CCS with the PUD overlay. The city approved the SmartCode zone. So we have the two zoning codes. So the SmartCode was approved in July 2009. And after that, staff and the property owner at the time thought it made more sense to bring the project back to become SmartCode. So it was approved as SmartCode with SC5 zone at that time. And then an infill plan was prepared for the project, and that was approved in March of 2010, again with subdivision approval. Project components included public streets, so before they were going to be private. There was no phasing plan associated with it. There were, again, the off-site traffic mitigation and those improvements. Public access would have been allowed on the boardwalk, and then the 10% civic space, which is a carryover from the PUD because the SmartCode only requires the 5%. So this is an exhibit showing you what was the approved civic space. So it was 2.88 acres. Again, that was 10%. And it's shown here, circled by the red. This would have been the main civic space. And then this is the riverfront esplanade, which was called the boardwalk at the time. And then this is what is now renamed West 3rd Avenue. And this would have been kind of part of the civic space as well. The project history now, there's a change of ownership, 2012. The new owner is Liberty Bankers Life. And they are proposing to amend the plan for the project so that it is more marketable for them and removes some of the restrictions and makes it work for them and to help hopefully get development on the project. The applicant and representative met with the city's development review committee multiple times to discuss the proposed amendment and desires of the city staff to include in that. The DRC is comprised of the community development staff, so planning and engineering, and the building official, as well as city's urban forester, and then we have representation from police and fire as well. So I just want to point that out, so there's lots of people come together, review the project, and provide feedback. So the proposed changes include changing the district names. So each of the blocks were identified as districts. So there was a name, I would say family district or residential district. And so that was removed. That's been removed in this proposed plan, and it's just referenced by block names. Same with some of the description within those blocks. It doesn't go into so much restrictive detail on what uses would be allowed within each. Underground parking requirement was initially placed on the Block E, and so the applicant would like to remove that. The project had kind of a shared parking plan, and so there was a need for underground parking, but with the proposed amendment, that underground parking, the need for that would go away. There's an additional proposed access to Block E off of McReynolds Drive, and I can show you kind of where these are. So Block E, where they would have had the underground parking, is in this. This is Block E. And then the additional proposed access, actually I guess it'd be better to show you on the next one. So here's a portion of Block E. So here's some additional access, and then there would be access up here. So this is excerpted. If you'd like to see the full image, I have that if we need to go back to that. A mix of horizontal and vertical mixed use is being requested versus having all vertical mixed use. And so that's, instead of having every building have to have multiple uses, that it would allow a combination of that and horizontal, which would be side by side, so a mix of that. Buildings within Block B would be allowed to orient toward the river. And the Block B is this one, if I can get the cursor there, over here. So they thought it would be appropriate, so west of this westernmost roundabout, to have some of the buildings be able to orient toward the river to take advantage of the views. And the civic space was reduced to the 1.76 acres, which meets the 5% SmartCode requirement. So this is the proposed civic space. So it, as I mentioned, it just meets the 5%. They have reduced this area, but they have added a pocket park up here, which is consistent with the Spokane Street Corridor project. And so that would be added with some access down to the Esplanade. And then this would be a connection down to a main civic space, so it'd be ADA accessible. And then this is a city-owned parcel. And then this part, including this, in the green would be the riverfront Esplanade. And so on both the approved civic space and this one, just wanted to point out the Esplanade is included in the total acreage because that is considered civic space. The requested variances, so projects are allowed to come before the city and say, okay, we can't meet everything in SmartCode, we want to request variances. There's a few things that you can't request them for. These ones are permitted. There's the exception to the block size. So in the SC5, there's a maximum block size of 2,000 feet, which is the perimeter of it. The proposed project with the amendments would be up, generally consistent with that, so a little bit, some are below that and some are slightly above. This was approved previously when the project was approved as SmartCode, so that's already been approved in the past. Allowable building height up to 85 feet. So this one also, this was the initial project as planned unit development had this. It was approved again with this 85-foot height when it was SmartCode, and then they're requesting this once again. And that, just to kind of clarify, that would probably be between 6 and 7 stories. Just depends on how high the first story is constructed. And then the other one that has been added was not part of the proposal before, was this exception to the 50% thoroughfare requirement for civic space. So that's requiring that the main civic space, that at least 50% of it is along a thoroughfare. The previous project didn't have that either, so it wouldn't have met it. It was more of an oversight. So those are the 3 requested variances as part of this proposal. And then, as I mentioned, the staff had met with the applicant, and we had a long list of things that we were concerned about with the proposal and other things that we wanted to have included just to provide a little bit more assurance on how the project would be developed. And so some of the things that were requested and were incorporated were to specify that the principal frontages would be along Spokane Street and 4th. Oh, is that, I'm sorry, that should be 3rd. Apologize, the slide is wrong, so it should be West 3rd. And so that means that those buildings would need to front those. So that was clarification. The triggers for public improvements were added, and so there's more detail in the plan that says when certain blocks are developed, what improvements would be required. We added some, or asked them to add some design criteria for those buildings within the Block B that would be oriented toward the river to ensure that it looked like and provided some dual access from the front and the rear of the buildings. There's a parking easement that exists for the condominium buildings, so there's for 26 parking spaces, and so there was language added to the plan to convey that. The DRC asked for some clarification on the built form and exterior materials. And then we also asked to require master plans for the landscaping, lighting, and signage, just so that there would be a cohesive look to the project if it was developed by multiple developers. And then a clarification on signage types, so a requirement to provide some wayfinding signage at key locations, and then also blade signs for the retail uses. And then lastly, to ensure that there would be public parking provided for the civic space. So that concludes the intro and the applicant's here,
Okay.
and then I'll do my staff report after.
Okay, if we can have the applicant come forward.
Thanks, Ellie. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission. My name is Gary Young, for the record, and for those of you that don't recognize me with my new summer haircut, that is who I am. We are located at 311 3rd Avenue, Coeur d'Alene, and our business is Veritas. We are landscape architects and land use planners. We are here tonight representing Liberty Bankers Life, as Hilly had mentioned. We've been working with the Design Review Committee for, I think, the past 8 months. And I was going to say that I had a full head of hair when I started, but it's totally unrelated. So I can't blame that on them. But it's been a long process. We've gone back and forth and had several drafts of the amendments. As Hillary had mentioned, this project was approved back in 2003. That's when I first became involved, when I was on your side of the table with the project as a PUD. So I'm very familiar with the project from its inception and up to its current status. Again, it was approved as a SmartCode neighborhood infill plan in 2010. I was not involved in that, but it became consistent with the rest of the SmartCode zoning in the city center when it changed from PUD to a SmartCode development. The developer at that time felt like that was the right thing to do, and the changes that came about were pretty significant from the PUD to the SmartCode because they fell under the SmartCode zoning requirements. However, that's what Liberty Bankers Life was faced with when they took the ownership back over in 2012, and kind of the impetus for the project was, let me go to this first slide here, and I'll show you that, and Hillary had talked about Block E, which is, I'm doing this left-handed, so Block E, which is this block. The very first action that Liberty Bankers Life wanted to take was they wanted to plat Block E, and the very first thing they were faced with was the approved regulatory plan required underground parking to be installed in that block. That didn't fit with their development plans, with their marketing plans, and it didn't fit with the current market conditions that we're faced with today. So in talking with the city, they let us know that at that time we needed to do an amendment to the regulatory plan. It was not Liberty Bankers Life intent to change the plan. Matter of fact, the plan has actually changed very little from the original plan. And I'll go through what those proposed amendments were and what the differences were. But essentially, the road network is still the same. The blocks are still the same, although they've been retitled and given just block names. So the overall character of the project really wasn't the intent to change that at all, but there were just a few items that were in the regulatory plan that made the marketing and development of this project very difficult. And it just so happens with the very first phase they wanted to plat, the underground parking was one of those one of those issues. So we began the amendment process and about 8 months ago, and so we have developed this as the overall plan, neighborhood plan. It still has a lot of the same conditions as development occurs within the project. If there is a development that comes in that has a significant impact on traffic, there's still the requirement that was under the original plan that a traffic impact analysis be conducted, and both mitigation measures for transportation improvements, both on-site and off-site, would be required to be looked at before that development was approved. So that was a condition that was under the original master development agreement, and it continues to be a condition with this project as well. The other plans that have been developed for the project are basically just the cross sections of the different streets. Nothing really changed there either. Same cross sections, same thoroughfare configuration according to the SmartCode. We made some clarifying notes on sidewalks and so forth, and that was the only change there. We prepared a utility plan. This was part of the original plan as well. I think we expanded it a little bit based on input from engineering staff, and so part of this is the conceptual water and sewer plans for the project. We also added a new plan, and that was requested by staff, a conceptual stormwater plan. Where are we taking the stormwater to in the project? Evidently that hadn't been addressed in the original SmartCode, in the original PUD or the SmartCode plan. So we prepared a conceptual plan that showed where that stormwater is being conveyed to. Okay, so as I mentioned, we met with DRC several times. They've been a pleasure to work with. I've worked with most of those staff members for many years, and so we just kind of worked through the amendments that staff wanted to see, that they felt were helped clarify the plan, and it actually ended up working out better, I think, for the new developer to have gone through that process, because they gained a better understanding of what the requirements would be under the SmartCode. So the proposed amendments were revisions that were desired by the applicant to increase flexibility and marketability of the property, and I'll go through those real quick in a minute. We also proposed many edits. I kid the staff, I think we had about 100 edits that came from the DRC that were wording changes to the plan and so forth that we included. There was also a new requirement for a master lighting plan, a master sign plan, and a master landscape plan be prepared so that there was a common design theme with those elements within the project. So that was also made a part of the plan. So really the proposed improvement was to remove the underground parking in Block E and eliminate the residential only verbiage that was in blocks F and G. Now those are I'll go back to the plan real quick here. These are the two blocks that are located down on the waterfront next to the existing condominiums. So blocks G and blocks F were designated in the original plan to be residential only. I was a little surprised when I saw that in there, because the initial discussion, the initial plan for the Post Falls Landing was to allow the possibility for ground floor commercial retail along the riverfront and with condominium development over the top. So somewhere during the process, and I'm not sure that it was on purpose or what, the verbiage got put in there to be residential only. We certainly think that residential is probably the most likely use for that waterfront, but we also wanted to have the flexibility should there be some interest in developing some retail and commercial along the waterfront, or in Block F, which is an area back behind that's considerably higher than the waterfront. So there's really a desire to do more of a mixed-use type of development under the new plan. Okay, so let me go back to our proposed amendments. Also, as Hillary had mentioned, there was a requirement that there be mixed use on all the blocks that face onto the main streets area of the plan, and those are designated to be Spokane Street and 3rd Avenue, where the development is required to face onto those particular streets. And the requirement was for mixed use. We just added the clarification that mix doesn't necessarily have to be on top of one another, but they can be side by side on that block as well. Pretty simple amendment. With regard to the civic space, and this was presented by staff to be a significant reduction in the civic area, which, in fact, if you look at the number, it is. But when you look at the original plan that was proposed, the civic area was West 3rd Avenue here. Okay, so not sure exactly why they're calling the street part of the civic area, although there was some talk about doing some development in that median. The developer, Liberty Bankers Life, under the new plan, is still offering or still planning to develop West 3rd Avenue and still put the median and so forth in. So nothing's really changed there. We're just not calling it civic area space. So when you look at the numbers, it's a little bit deceiving, but we went back to what the SmartCode requirement is in terms of civic area, and that's a 5% dedication of open space. So what we've done is proposed down on the waterfront, the city of Post Falls owns this piece that is not colored on the waterfront. They acquired that from the previous developer through a land trade, or of some means anyway. And so we located our civic area directly adjacent to it, thinking that that's a perfect site for an urban plaza type development. And we assumed that would be what how the city would develop their property as well. Certainly makes sense as part of the esplanade that goes along the riverfront. So the civic area that is required by Liberty Bankers Life or whoever purchases and develops the property would be to connect to the city-owned property and develop that as an urban plaza. Now, the developer is required to not only dedicate that, but to construct that as well as the esplanade is a requirement for that to be constructed with the project. And again, as Hillary had indicated, Liberty Bankers Life is familiar with the proposed Spokane Street improvements that hopefully will be coming out to bid here very soon and be under construction this summer. Part of that design included a pocket park around the water tower, and there was some needed property around that water tower in order for it to be able to gain access up to the water tower site and have adequate area for pocket park development. So that was also included as part of the civic area. So that's the discussion that we've had. We're providing ADA accessibility from the roundabout, the westernmost roundabout, down to the civic area. That will also be part of the civic area space to provide that ADA connection. We already talked about the pocket park. Part Part of the amendments requested by staff were some very specific infrastructure improvements. If you've had the opportunity to read through the plan, you'll see as each block develops, there are very specific improvements of roadways and so forth that have been made a part of the plan that were not a part of the original plan. So those are all new additions to the plan. It helps clarify at what point do roads get extended, at what point does sewer and water get extended, and so forth. So that made that very specific where it was obviously not before. It identified the principal frontages within the plan as Spokane Street and West 3rd. That's the streets where the buildings are required to be set up onto the street and face the street and put parking in behind, and that's a SmartCode requirement. Buildings located west of the roundabout, Hillary talked about that. We wanted the ability, even though it says that if you face 3rd Avenue, if you're on 3rd Avenue, you have to face the street. At the roundabout, it didn't make sense to orient those waterfront lots or structures towards the roundabout. Made more sense to allow they be oriented towards the river. So that was a change that we requested as well. And again, the new requirements include a lighting master plan, a signage master plan, and a landscape master plan. So in summary, again, this does not change the overall character of the Post Falls Landing project. It does comply with the SmartCode requirements. It does remain in conformance with your comprehensive plan. It does the variances that were discussed were previous variances in the existing plan. So we didn't really request them. We just felt like they should stay in place. The proposed conditions that are in your staff report are acceptable to the applicant. We've gone through those in great detail with the design review committee and with the applicant. And the DRC supports the proposed amended plan per their staff report. And so at this time, we are requesting a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission as we move this forward to the City Council. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for the applicant at this point?
Okay.
I do.
Okay.
Gary, how wide is that ADA pathway or the ADA accessibility strip, whatever it is, the access down to the river?
Right. That probably scales out at about 40 to 50 feet wide, something like that.
Okay. And I was just looking at it, and maybe it's just it's deceptive, but it looks to be about 25 maybe. And when I did a drive-by today, there appears to be about 40 feet of elevation difference across that. Right. And I guess I'm a little concerned how that'll be ADA accessible short of an elevator. And I'd hate to see you come back for another change in that being an ADA accessible route. The other pedestrian connection to the Esplanade appears to be down in the residential area along the riverfront.
Right.
Wouldn't that be a little bit better area for a pedestrian connection down to the
Are you
that area?
Speaking of this area down here?
Yeah, somewhere down there, or we don't have to drop 40 feet in a short distance.
If you drove through the project, or if you looked at today, you'll see that that's even more of a severe drop-off in that area to be able to get down. So that was actually what we discussed with the DRC as not one of the areas that ADA accessibility would be required.
And so I'd hate to see you have to come back for an amendment just for the ADA accessibility. Would it be prudent to give you some flexibility on where that ADA accessibility is?
Well, bear in mind, and we didn't really talk about that, we do have ADA accessibility at Falls Park. So the Esplanade terminates into the parking lot at Falls Park. So we would be able to provide ADA accessibility there. Staff felt it was important to have it at this point, just in case this section of the Esplanade does not develop before the Civic Center gets developed. And as far as the width of that, I mean, this isn't necessarily a scaled plan. So if we say we'll provide ADA accessibility, we'll take the necessary area to get the ramps ADA accessible down to the civic area.
Okay.
Okay. I don't think we haven't been at least tied in with a specific width on that, or it's basically an area calculation that we've proposed. So if we do need to make that a little wider to get those ADA accessible ramps in, then that will make that area a little bit wider.
Would that come at the sacrifice of other area within civic space?
Not necessarily, but we do want to stay at that acreage, so we could take a little bit off, say, the south side of that and add it up to that. So we're not suggesting that we add more additional acreage to it, but we would provide the necessary width to get the ADA accessibility down to the civic area.
Okay.
Yep.
Any other questions for staff or for the applicant? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Young. Hillary. Staff report.
Can the audience ask questions?
Not unless you signed up to testify, ma'am.
Okay, so the Development Review Committee's comments were that the proposed amendment is consistent with SmartCode, and the DRC does support the requested administrative authorizations and variances regarding the maximum block size, maximum building height, and the civic space with the 50% thoroughfare requirement. SC5 zone requires provisions for rear alleys, and this was discussed in the staff report. So the applicant is not requesting administrative authorization or variance to get away from doing alleys, nor did staff think that needed to be addressed. We just wanted to clarify that as the project was approved in the past, the existing approved plan, they aren't showing any alleys. The current layout of the road network and the blocks, it may be tricky to put alleys within each of the blocks, but they could fit blocks, and there was a discussion of certain locations where that might be appropriate. And as I mentioned before, that the PUD approval and prior approval of SmartCode project did not include alleys. Planning division, the planning staff is also in support of some of these items, removing the underground parking from Block E. That did seem really prohibitive and unnecessary. If alternative parking solutions could be found, they would still be able to do underground parking if that was a need, but we didn't feel it needed to be a requirement. We also thought that the increased flexibility of the land uses within the blocks was appropriate. And we were agreeable to the mix of the horizontal and vertical mixed uses within the Main Street area, and that is consistent with SmartCode. The definition of the mixed use in SmartCode allows both. And then we were part of the Development Review Committee, so of course we supported the additions requested by the DRC. The proposed 5% civic space does meet SmartCode, and as I mentioned, the proposed amendments are consistent with SmartCode, and also the request is consistent with the comprehensive plan policies. The proposed amendments didn't change any of the consistency from the previous analysis with the comprehensive plan. Under the engineering division's comments, first is the transportation comments. The proposed thoroughfare layout and road assemblies are appropriate and consistent with the previous approvals. And there is still the need for the offsite mitigation, which would be identified with the development of each phase and consistent with the traffic impact analysis as indicated. Under the water reclamation, there's adequate capacity in the city facilities. The proposed layout and sizing of the facilities would be appropriate and consistent with the previous approvals. and the development along the riverfront, esplanade, and other areas may require individual pumps to convey sewerage to the city facilities, and that is due to that elevation change. Domestic water, the city facilities have capacity to handle the project, and the proposed layout and sizing of facilities is appropriate and consistent with the previous approvals. For the Post Falls Police Department and the Kootenai County Fire and Rescue, neither had submitted formal comments, but both of them did participate as part of the Development Review Committee. So that concludes the staff report. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions for Hillary?
Yeah, I just had a quick question for my own clarification. The Esplanade, that's public access?
Yes.
100% public, so no matter what's built up to it, it's
Correct.
still public access? And then also, I know there's one entrance on 4th, right?
Right.
And there's 2 on Spokane Street.
Correct.
There's the main one, yeah. That one, the smaller one right now is the access for the residents who live there.
And that is private. So there may or may not be some access that would be allowed to allow maybe some, exiting from the rest of the project, or it may just be allowed to serve these areas, but it is currently, this is private serving.
So it could possibly be allowed to have access from the other parts of the development out that road also?
Potentially, that was discussed, and I don't know if engineering or anyone else wants to clarify anything on that. But the primary access would be on the West 3rd off Spokane Street and then up off of.
Did staff have any concerns with traffic coming out of that if it was accessed from the other parts too, coming out into that private access, or?
Oh, more just would that be acceptable for the property owners involved that wanted it private, not in terms of not being able to handle it.
Okay.
There
All right.
would ultimately be a signal here that would handle that, and
Okay.
the improvements that are part of the Spokane Street Corridor project does take into account kind of the turning movements that would be required based on kind of maximum development of the project, and that looked at it under that scenario, under the planned unit development when it was more grandiose.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Testimony. Anybody signed up to speak in favor of? Anybody neutral?
Yes.
We have Mr. James Powers.
I'm James Powers. I live at 415 West Waterside Drive, which is in the condos there in Post Falls. And as indicated, I'm neutral. I don't really oppose this, what has been brought before you, but we have concerns that it's a little bit not taking into consideration the changes that have occurred as a result of the failure of Harry Green and the bankruptcy and the rest. And some things have changed since then, and I'm not quite sure why they were not addressed in this infill plan. And some things in particular, for example, is there is reference to the landowner, and the landowner has a significant set of responsibilities with respect to maintaining the property, to pay for upkeep, to maintain design requirements, the rest of it. But it is unclear to me who the landowner is. If that means it's Liberty, that's one thing. If it means it's possibly 4 or 5 developers who bought pieces of it, I don't see how that works, and I don't understand why it has not been clarified. And that is a significant issue. As was mentioned, the concern about the road that is private, we are being told that the Post Falls doesn't want to take it, but somebody's got to maintain it. And if there's a tremendous amount of use as the whole place gets developed, the wear and tear on that road will be very significant. We're not even sure how it's going to be controlled during construction when you bring heavy construction trucks in and out and down that road. I've lived in developments before where this has happened and they've devastated the roads, broken the gates. There is a gate there, as I'm sure you're aware. We don't understand how this will work. I also note that the map that was shown by your planning group differs from the map that was presented from the architect. Largely because there's a whole section of land associated with that road known as Tract A. It is separately platted and is currently not owned by Liberty. And so the discussion about that little additional park by the water tower, that's great, and nobody I think opposes it, but it's not Liberty's to give anybody. They don't own it. I'm concerned about the fact that there's discussion of 26 parking places. I'm fully aware of the easement, and I know where that number came from, but there are 40 occupants in the condos. I don't understand why there could not have been an update to 40 parking places from the 26, just because that's reality. That's what he built. That's what's there. And I don't quite understand that. I don't understand why there's no mention of the marina. Liberty doesn't really want it there. That's fine, but it's there. What happens to that marina? There are 11 piers that are connected. They're not floating piers. There are 11 piers that are attached to the land. I don't know what happens to those. That's not addressed. Do they go away? Who's responsible for cleaning it up? Will it be an eyesore if you're sitting out there with an abandoned set of marina? I don't know the answers to these questions, so I don't want to oppose what Liberty wants to do. I just don't think that it's been completely thought out. And I think there's a lot more that has to be included in your consideration before you judge what you want to do. So I'm not objecting to this, but I think you may want to delay a little bit till some of these questions get answered. Otherwise, people will be coming back to you. What are we doing about that road? What are we doing about that marina? How are we handling, who is responsible for making sure this gets paid for? It says in here, it's the landowner, but I don't know who the landowner is. And these are the kinds of questions that I think have to be addressed before anything can proceed. I thank you for your time. And again, we're not trying to block anything. We just want to make sure that everybody knows what's coming.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can the commission ask questions of those testifying?
The commissioners can ask questions of people who testify, yes.
Okay. So yes, you can ask.
Certainly. Yes.
Great. It's my understanding, and staff will correct me if I'm wrong, but Liberty does own the property that we're talking about.
They do not own Tract A where the piece of property is that's on, yes.
Okay, I'm talking
Okay, I'm sorry.
specifically about the presentation that we're having here, and it's my understanding Liberty does own that property. Is that correct?
Outside of Tract A, they own.
Outside of Tract A?
And Tract A is the road, yes.
Okay. So does the condo, is there an association of the condo?
Yes, there is.
Group? So there should be bylaws of the condo association that clearly specifies the responsibilities of maintenance and operations of the outlying properties that are in that particular area. Is that correct?
No.
There's no bylaws?
Well, wait, excuse me. To clarify, there is a condo association.
Okay.
I'm an officer in that association, and for those two buildings, there is a condominium and there are rules.
Okay, so you have bylaws.
And bylaws, yes.
And so also in those bylaws, it would probably explain who has the authorization to maintain the association, what we call general property or regular property that's in there?
Yes, but not Tract A.
I
Okay, I'm trying to be clear. I'm trying to be very clear. Only for a very narrow space, which was shown and said as not to be included, which I also find interesting since this is a development plan for the entire Post Falls Landing, but yes.
Okay, so pertaining to the marina, where does ownership apply to the marina? Is that the association's property,
No,
real
it is not.
estate?
It is not.
Is that property of Liberty?
I'm not familiar who actually retains ownership of the marina.
We don't know who owns that particular property.
Taylor, do you?
That personal property, I think, is what it would be. Is that correct?
That'll have to be answered by the applicant on rebuttal.
Okay. So I'm just trying to go through some questions that have been brought up. It's my understanding that the city is the owner of the water tower and the property that the water tower sits under. Is that correct? Okay. Okay, that's all the questions I have right now.
As a clarification to help understand that, if you put up the map, and I'm not sure how to work this, you will see that yellow triangle that goes out. That part is not owned by the city, nor is that part owned by Liberty. And if you call up the map that you brought up originally to show that, it will show the actual legal boundaries and ownership, which is different than what is shown on that map. And that's what was presented on the initial presentation from your planning group.
I just wanted to clarify this, and I think the applicant's going to have to clarify it a little bit more, too. The area, I guess there's partial ownership of the tract and the road and the land that surrounds the water tower. So this is one from our GIS mapping. If I can, oh, it won't show on there. So it does show that that is Post Falls Landing. I don't know if that's Master Association. So that is, so the portion of that. So a portion of that is owned by the applicant as well.
No, it is not. It is a totally separate, independent organization. It is incorporated under the state of Idaho, and Liberty, because they own some property, is a member, and a voting member of that group, but they don't own it. Same way we are voting members on that group. And in fact, I am a member of that board. So I know that. In fact, we checked this very clearly with the assessors, and I checked it again today when I picked up the material to point out that that was on your tax rolls as belonging to the Post Falls Master Association, not to Liberty. And we paid the taxes on it, property taxes.
So I have a question.
Thank you for standing up for us.
So I don't think we can ask.
Hillary?
No, I don't think we can go back.
Okay.
So at this time,
Can we ask questions of staff at any point in time?
I think the applicant representative should get up and respond to the comments and answer any questions you've got.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Commission. Gary Young again. I'd like to also ask if I could have a representative from Liberty Bankers Life participate in the rebuttal as well. Would that be okay?
Yes, but if we have new evidence introduced, then the folks in the audience are going to have an opportunity to rebut any new evidence.
This is just strictly for the purposes of rebutting testimony that you just received. Okay. And I'll let Jim talk to the ownership issue on Tract A. As far as traffic onto the private road, again, as I mentioned, any development that's going to create an impact on the road network within the Post Falls Landing is going to need to have a traffic impact analysis. So there has been some discussion about possibly not allowing development within the project access onto that private road if it is in fact going to create a lot of traffic and have an impact on that road. So those are really development issues. We understand that that's a private ownership, but we also understand that Liberty Bankers Life owns property on that private road as well. So it's a situation that will need to have to be discussed when you're looking at a specific development proposal and just what impact may occur on that or will occur on that private road. So hopefully that answers that. As far as whether there's adequate parking spaces, 26 for when they need 40, that's the existing condition. That's what Liberty Bankers Life inherited. There's a very specific easement on that piece of property. And actually, what I'd like to do, since that only shows a portion of the. I could flip to your presentation as the plan. Okay. Sure. As far as what's shown to be a part of the SmartCode plan, this tract of land back here is the tract of land that's subject to that parking easement. In other words, these condo owners have easement for parking, surface parking on that. There's a very specific easement that's in place. It's always also part of the language in the plan amendment that says if that parking gets displaced, that it has to be provided elsewhere in the project, or those 26 spaces just can't simply be developed over because of ownership, partial or prominent ownership of that tract of land. So, and again, Jim will talk about the ownership in Tract A. He's very well versed on that issue. As far as ownership of the water tower, again, that falls into the same issue of who owns Tract A, and does Liberty Bankers Life have the ability to make this a part of the SmartCode plan. But this piece of property is within the SmartCode zoning as the city adopted it, so we made it a part of the plan. So it is designated as part of Block F in the plan, but we do recognize that it has some parking easement issues on it, and we actually point that out in the plan amendment, whereas that wasn't clear. And that was at the request of the existing homeowners association. I met with a representative from there, and he asked that that be included in the plan, which we did include. So I think the rest of the issues that were brought up can be resolved with the discussion on the ownership of Tract A. That seems to be the real bone of contention here. So if I can ask Mr. Lair to come up and explain that.
One question I would have is, what's the difference between the 26 spaces and the 40 spaces that the gentleman from the condos was talking about? Are there 40 units in the condos?
That was part of the original platting and parking arrangement for the portion of the project that is not included, the condo development. So that was the agreement that he would provide those number of spaces on that tract of land for that condo unit. So it's not a part of the project. We can't change that. That's memorialized as part of the platting and easement that came as a part of the platting of the condo developments. It's not a part of the plan amendment, or even a part of the plan to put parking there. We don't really know how that tract will be developed. That's yet to be determined. So if it is developed and it displaces the parking, then whoever develops it is responsible for providing those number of parking spaces. So that doesn't go away with our proposed plan. Okay.
State your name and address for the record, please.
I am Jim Lear. I'm Vice President of Liberty Bankers Life Insurance. Company address is 1605 LBJ Freeway, Dallas, Texas.
Okay.
And I can answer, I believe, both of those questions. Okay. As far as there are 40 parking spaces for those two condominiums as required under your building code. 14 of them belong to the homeowners association. They're directly in front of, I think, Pier 20 building. They were short 26 spaces to meet the 1-per-1 requirement, and therefore the easement was granted for an additional 26 units, or 26 parking spaces. It's not 26 in total, it's 40 in total. They own 14 of them. And they have a permanent easement for the others. Now, as far as, I should also add that in addition to being a vice president for Liberty Bankers Life Insurance, I am the president of the Post Falls Landing Master Association. And by virtue of that, that is the ownership of the Post Falls Landing Master Association is comprised 53% by Liberty Bankers Life Insurance, and the other 47% is Pier 20 and Pier 21 Homeowners Association. So we do have an ownership interest in Tract A, okay, a majority ownership interest in Tract A. we own Lot 3 in its entirety, which is where the parking easement is. So I would welcome any questions that you may
The
have.
ownership of the marina?
The marina is in a legal action right now. We own the marina. We own the access to marina. We own Block G, okay? There is an appeals court actually going to, I believe, the Idaho Court of Appeals as to the ownership of the specific docks. That is the question.
Okay.
But Liberty Bankers owns Lot G, owns all of the approaches to the marina, own the fuel tanks to the marina, okay?
And will you be taking care of that area then as part of, will
We
you
are-
be
we-
funding
well,
the,
Because it's tied up in litigation, we're not able to operate it. So we have secured it, we've trained off the boat launch, we have drained the tanks, okay, complied with all of the Idaho EPA requirements for that, pumped them out, and done as best we can to block access, okay, so that, for safety purposes, okay.
So from a maintenance standpoint, you're still maintaining
That is correct.
everything. Okay. Any other questions?
Okay, so I'm trying to understand the ownership of the water tower, excuse me, the property that the water tower sits under or sits over. So I'm hearing a couple of different things, that there's a different entity involved that has partial ownership in that particular property. So the question is, does the city own the property that the water tower sits on, or does it not?
The city owns the water tower, okay? We own, Liberty Bankers owns, and you can, I think, well, I don't have a little, I don't know how to operate these pointers, but the water tower is actually owned by the city, I believe, okay? Liberty Bankers owns the land to the south of it, okay, which is part of Block F.
Okay.
The northern part of where that proposed park would be is part of Tract A, which is the Post Falls Landing Master Association, of which Liberty Bankers is the majority, but does not own it in its entirety. So,
The area in white is what the city owns. So they own the
Right.
water tower
And-
and the land
Right.
that the water tower sits on. So
Sits
on.
that's shown in white in there.
Okay.
right.
The
And I think you
yellow
can
is
see
the
it on that.
proposed civic area.
Yeah, there you go, okay. And Liberty Bankers owns that portion.
Okay. So
In
I
its
just want to be
entirety.
really clear that the water tower sits on property that is owned by the city of Post Falls.
That is correct.
Okay.
Yep.
Very clear. Thank you.
Yep.
Any other
Any
questions?
other questions?
I guess I've got a question. I'd have some concern if Liberty decided to move the 26 parking spaces way across the project from the condos. Is there a commitment to retain those 26 parking spaces proximate to the existing condos?
The existing easement allows the 26 parking spaces to be to be on any portion of the development. From a practical standpoint, that's really, given the specific uses that are permitted under SmartCode, that's really not a realistic thing that's going to happen.
I realize it's not a realistic thing.
Well, it's not
that would
permitted.
happen. I guess I have a concern if the underlying property owner would try to hold up the members of the homeowners association by moving the parking from being adjacent to the condos to being at an inconsistent location. So I guess I'm asking, is there a commitment on Liberty Mutual's part to keep that parking at approximate location to the existing condos?
I can't speak, I guess. There's some very specific requirements and covenants in that recorded easement that provide some limitations to both sites, I guess. It would be, you know, I don't have a copy of it with me. We've certainly left it there and have not done anything to move it, okay? I have no reason to believe that we ever would. And again, the zoning of the SmartCode for the rest of the development would not necessarily permit that.
At any rate, the commission sees my concern, I think.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, so that gets back to the question that you just kind of put out, and I'll throw it back to Hillary if I may, is the way it's, the proposed amendment, would that provide security to the homeowners, the condo owners association, and the security of their particular parking spaces in that area?
Yes, in the staff report, there are conditions. So condition 13 says a parking easement has been granted to Pier 20 on the Boardwalk LLC and Pier 21 on the Boardwalk LLC for 26 space parking area constructed on Lot 3, which is blocks F and G. Any future development on Lot 3 must retain or replace the parking spaces per that easement.
Okay.
So
to our attorney, does that answer your question or concern?
That eases some of my concerns. I guess the discussion language that the developers' representatives had me concerned that they might feel free to move that anywhere they wanted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a question. When you say replace, does that mean replace anywhere in that lot or that block?
that was the intent. It could be clarified, and that could be
Yeah, yeah.
something that
I
is
would-
part of, a motion could be clarified.
Do I do that?
I'm going to close the public hearing this time, and we'll open it up to discussion amongst the commission.
Where do you want to start?
Start down here with,
I'd like to find out where, I'd like that clarified as to where the placement of the parking could be moved. If it was moved somewhere on that, if it has to be close to them, or, I mean, like they say, their concern is it could be anywhere, or staff's concerns.
But Hillary said we could put that in the language.
We
that
can
we
make
could
that
include
as
that
a
in the
part of that
language of
condition.
approval.
Yeah, I'd like to see that, yes.
Okay.
I thought that was already in there.
well, it's in there, but it's not specific to that parcel.
Maybe put,
It says, just
Okay.
relocate.
Okay.
maybe put some language in there that says in close proximity. That way,
Would that be
there's some wiggle.
5 feet, 10 feet, 30 feet, 40 feet? What would that be?
I think tying them down might do a certain number might be a mistake, but the intent would be that in the,
Leave it in there.
in the same block of that nature. I don't know, close proximity seems enough. I'm sure that if they move it, the attorneys will get involved.
I think the language, like in accessibility, is the least circuitous, feasibly possible, something like that. The most direct route that you can do feasibly. That's the best you can do.
Yeah.
Talk to the mic. So, Mr. Chairman, I have some concerns pertaining to the pending legal actions that are taking place. Should we have any concern about that pertaining to the recommendation that we may make?
I don't think that those are relevant to any of the changes that the developer was asking.
Okay, great. Thank you.
One thing that I like about this, in particular, and I really hope that the development happens such that there is some mixed use down on the river, specifically speaking, because I think the Esplanade, when right adjacent to residential uses, becomes a lot more private in feel and in character than it does if there's commercial uses like a restaurant with people having dinner out on on the Esplanade. So I really like that and giving them the flexibility, and I really hope it develops like that. My one concern is that I don't think that the civic space
and that ADA accessible route, basically being a zigzag of concrete going down the hill, really meets the intent of civic space as we're looking at it. I don't think that the accessible route to the civic space should be considered part of the civic space. And that's a concern of mine. I don't think it meets that intent. So my preference would be to see that the civic space, and I don't care which part grows, but the pedestrian ADA connection to the civic space on the river not be included in the acreage and the 5%. Other than that, I think giving them the flexibility to have all kinds of, to market it a lot better with a lot less restrictions makes a lot of sense, and will hopefully foster some development in what's really kind of a little bit of a blighted area.
Brad?
Most of my questions have been answered,
Okay.
so I would support the recommendation.
Okay. Mark?
Well, I do know for a fact that some of the condo owners have been frustrated, and I think their expectations were a little bit different when they purchased the property, and there's a lot of reasons for that, and there's a lot of things that have changed. But I actually look at this as, at first I thought it was reducing the quality, and I'm seeing it more, to use one word, as a simplification, which I think is a good thing. Anything to facilitate growth and good, smart, and quality growth is going to help everybody, including the current owners, I believe. And there is some cost savings, I'm hearing, but without sacrificing quality wholesale. So I actually see it as a positive thing.
Nancy?
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Well, I applaud the design review committee of working with staff and the owners here to work out a lot of details. It sounds like there's a ton of things that have been addressed for clarification purposes that I think benefits everybody concerned at this point. So I certainly think it hasn't changed the whole intent of what the original plat was all about, and I would support at this point moving forward myself. Any other comments, questions, concerns about a motion?
I'll make a motion. I move to recommend approval of PZ, let's see, SCA, excuse me, yes. SCA, let me get here.
1301.
1301.
-13-01.
-13-01, thank you. Adopting the findings and facts and conclusions, as well as the conditions of approval, amending condition 6C such that the ADA access is not included in the open space area or civic space area, and further amending condition 13 such that any future development on lot 3 must remain or replace the parking spaces in close proximity. I think is probably the best way I can put that.
I like the approximate and accessible.
Close proximity with reasonable accessibility. How's that sound? Better? And that's my motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call.
Yes.
Ostermeyer?
Yes.
Latham?
Aye.
Campy?
Yes.
Carey?
Yes.
Porter?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay. New business. I don't see any. Staff comments.
Just a quick one. I did hand out copies of the Strategic Plan Annual Accomplishments Report 2013. So this is now on the city's website as well, and so it just documents all the items and projects that were accomplished last year that were priorities within the strategic plan. So if you guys want to check that out, and it's, as I mentioned, it's online for the public to see as well.
Fantastic. Okay.
I would like the commission to have some short workshops as part of some upcoming meetings. I think you've got a couple new members, and if we talked about why you do things the way you do and what your responsibilities are, you know, I could see maybe having 3 hours of workshop time the rest of the year, and maybe doing it so that there is an hour tacked on before the meeting or after the meeting, something that wouldn't be obtrusive to completely ruining your day, but would give us an opportunity to talk about what your job is.
Okay.
I like that idea.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, thank you. Any commission comments?
I have one.
Okay.
I would like to see the meetings put together pursuing the discussion on SmartCode. We've had some opportunities to discuss, so hopefully that goes forward.
And I've got one as well. I had a conversation, kind of a happenstance conversation with Rob regarding the Spokane Street and Celtics Way intersection. And we've had conversations amongst us and in a workshop about a restaurant district and districting. And Rob brought it to my attention that that intersection is controlled by the state, by ITD, because they own the right-of-way and they control the right-of-way in that area, and they control Celtics Way right-of-way as well, because it's Old Highway 10. And so anything that we plan on doing there is really subject to ITD. And so hopefully, at least in my opinion, I certainly hope that the city and maybe even city council takes a run at gaining control of that. So maybe we can do something really neat there, have that opportunity.
It's an interesting one. Never thought of it as the old highway, but it still is the old highway. Yeah.
No.
Good. Okay, any other comments? Last item then is an adjournment. Need a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourned.